Hey guys, American Pizza Books here. So I'm back with another video, and this is going to be a book review on The Magicians by Lev Grossman. Now I finished this recently, about last week, and I had some very, I guess you could say conflicting feelings about this book. If you look at the reviews for this book on like Goodreads and Amazon, the reviews are very, very polarizing. There really isn't a whole lot of in-between with this book. Either you really, really like it, or you really, really hate it. And I can honestly see why, because this is a very... I appreciate it for what it is. It definitely is, I would say, unique for a urban, modern fantasy book or series. It is a trilogy. And I haven't read the other two books yet. I do plan on continuing with the trilogy, but, so I can understand why the reviews are polarizing because, and I'll get into that more in a minute, but basically this came out in, let's see, I believe it came out in like 2007, 2008, so it's been out for a while. There was a TV show made on it, which I believe ended like either last year or the year before. Yeah, it came out, so it's been around for a while. I'm not sure exactly what year it was published, but it has been out for a while. So if you're interested in like urban fantasy or modern fantasy or anything like that, I would hesitantly recommend this to people. Like I said, I appreciate it. I like it for what it is. I think it's got some good points, but I'll just go ahead and get into it. So as far as the premise goes, I'm just going to read the back blurb, because if I get into the premise, I'm just going to start rambling even more than I already am probably going to in this video. So basically, Quentin Coldwater is brilliant but miserable. A high school math genius, he's secretly fascinated with a series of children's fantasy novels set in a magical land called Filroy, and real life is disappointing by comparison. When Quentin is unexpectedly admitted to an elite secret college of magic, it looks like his wildest dreams may have come true. But his newfound powers lead him down a rabbit hole of hedonism and disillusionment, and ultimately to the dark secret behind the story of Filroy. The land of his childhood fantasies turns out to be much darker and more dangerous than he ever could have imagined. So, yeah, basically your main character, Quentin Coldwater, he's basically unsatisfied with his mundane life, and he longs for adventure and something more. And like it mentions, he is obsessed, well, not obsessed per se, but he's really into this fantasy series called Filroy. Kind of like the Harry Potter series, basically, for me and many others. But yeah, he's bored with life, and he's depressed, and he wants something more from life. And so he happens to come across, he gets admitted to this school, this magical school, and the thing is, people have compared this to like they say it's like Harry Potter for adults, or that it's like this or that. It's like Harry Potter in the sense that you have, this kid who goes to this magical school, and I'd say the Harry Potter comparisons would end there. Like, that's really all it has in common with Harry Potter, in my opinion anyways. It reminded me more of Narnia than anything, because you can definitely see the roots, the inspirations, pulled from like Narnia and whatnot, and how he finds the magical school and whatnot. And if you read it, you'll see what I'm talking about. But yeah, it reminded me more of like a much more mature, dark, and minus the religious, elements version of Narnia, basically, more or less. But still very much its own thing. So that's basically the premise. I guess I can get into the theme. I'd say the theme for this book is, this is just my opinion, but I'd say one of the themes is possibly like mental illness, because I do think that Quentin Coldwater is I think he definitely suffers from like depression and stuff. I'd say that like arguably most of the characters do in this book to some extent or another. There's even a line from one of the characters in this book. It's from the headmaster, I believe, of the magical school. He even makes a statement about how, you know, a lot of the magicians are really just, you know, unhappy people, and that's why they are magicians and why they, you know, have come to the school and everything. So it would make sense. So I think that might be one of the themes. In my opinion, it kind of is, whether it's intentional or not. I think definitely another theme is appreciating the things that you have. You know, because sometimes we can go through life and not appreciate the things, just the little things that we have and the important things that we have and the people that mean the most to us until we don't have them anymore. And I think that's definitely sort of a lesson theme in this book as well. Because you have Quentin Coldwater, the main character, you know, just going throughout life, you know, not really appreciating, you know, a lot of what he has and, you know, definitely not appreciating, you know, the people that he has either. So I'd say that's another theme of this book. I'd say that's the overall theme of the book pretty much. And I guess that will lead into the characters. See, the characters in this book are not very likable. Like, the characters in this book are very, very flawed. Like, they are very realistic. That is, I guess, one good thing about the characters in this book. They're very flawed, and they're very human. But I'd say there's maybe like one or two characters in this book that are maybe somewhat likable, but for the most part, the characters in this book are not very good people. Now, from what I've heard, they do develop and get better as the series goes on, but in this book, a lot of the characters really are not that likable, and I think it's meant to be that way. As far as like Quentin goes, you know, Quentin is himself not that likable. He does make many mistakes in this book. He makes one mistake in particular, like at one point in this book, where I just want to like fucking just slap him across the face and be like, "Dude, what the fuck are you doing?" But yeah, I mean, it's you're basically in the mind of this young man who is unsatisfied with everything, who's unhappy with everything. And even when he finally gets what he wants, what his heart, his heart's content, he's still unsatisfied with it and everything. So Quentin is very much just a little shit, you know. But again, I think that's intentional. I think these aren't characters that you're supposed to, you know, root for and get behind from the very beginning. This is not Harry Potter and his friends at Hogwarts, or, you know, Percy Jackson, his friends, and, you know, and Percy Jackson and the Olympians in that series. You know, these aren't courageous, brave characters. I mean, I'd say towards the end they more are, but like throughout most of this book, they're really not. They're not characters that you're gonna root for and get behind. I mean, you know, again, these characters are very flawed, and they're quite unlikable at times. Sometimes even to a fault, I'd say. But again, I think that's intentional. I don't think they're supposed to be like, you know, milquetoast wholesome characters or anything like that. So, you know, the book overall is very dark anyways, so I think that's kind of its appeal in a weird way. So, but as far as the characters go, I'd again, even though they're unlikable, I wouldn't say they're uninteresting. I think that a lot of the characters, each of the characters was very unique, and they all had their distinct personalities and stuff. So I think the characters were well done. They're just very flawed and not extremely likable at all. But they're interesting though. So, the pacing of this book is a slow book. Now, I don't mind slow pacing in books. Stephen King's books, for example, can be very slow at times, but I can still be interested and engaged if what's going on or what's being talked about is at least interesting or pertains to the story. In this book, you very much are just kind of following Quentin, because it's not like, again, with the Harry Potter series, which with each book it's Harry's each subsequent year at Hogwarts. This kind of glosses over Quentin's 5 years at the school. Sorry about this. And then follows him in, like, when he goes out into the real world after he graduates from the school and everything. So it's quite a slow book. It is boring at times too. Like, I will say that, like, it wasn't boring all the time. Like, in the beginning of the book, it was very much exploring, like, the magic system of this world and the rules and whatnot. And it was interesting because this magic is arguably more scientific, I would say. I guess that's how you would describe it, like more scientific, logical magic. It's not just, you know, you say a spell, or you say a word, or you wave a wand or something. It's more complicated than that, and that was really interesting. But you know, when they're they go to another school at one point to go through different tests, and they go through other stuff, and it can get very boring, and like I said, the pacing is, now I hear that's another thing that gets better as the series goes on, but as far as in this book, the pacing really doesn't pick up until like the last third of the book, I'd say, or the last quarter of the book. Until it gets to that point, it is quite slow. I'd say it's boring in parts, but I'd say, like, for me at least, for like a majority of the times that it was slow, it wasn't boring. At least I was still interested most of the time, even though it was very slow. And like I said, like, in my opinion, just because, even if a book is slow per se, it doesn't mean that it's bad. I mean, it can be, but as long as what's going on, or what's being talked about, or what's being explored is interesting and pertains to the story, then I'm fine with it. But there would be times where it would just be like kind of, you know, glossing over time and whatnot, and it would just be the characters, you know, drinking or doing something, and it would just be like, okay, you know, like, you know, but... So the pacing wasn't great by any means, so that would be probably a fault. It's something that a lot of people who have rated this book lower, one of the major criticisms of this book has been that it's very slow, and to some even very boring, which I can definitely understand. So there's that. What else? I mean, as far as like the journey goes, in terms of like how much I enjoyed reading this, or how much fun I had with it, I would I enjoyed it, but I didn't at the same time. Like, I enjoyed getting to know the world and everything, like getting to know the magic system and how it works in this book and whatnot. And like I said, I appreciate it for what it is, but it's also a very, very dark book. This is not a feel-good, you know, like I said, it's not Harry Potter. It's not this feel-good. Even at the darkest of times in Harry Potter, there was still, like, you know, underneath the darkness that was going on in Harry Potter in, like, book 5, 6, and 7, there was still kind of an undercurrent of positivity and lightness and hope. That really isn't in here. It's dark and depressing and dank, you know, in its entirety throughout. So, you know, given that, and given that it is slow, very slow at times, and given that these characters are not always likable, they're very, like I said, they're very unlikable most of the time, especially Quentin, there were times where I did not enjoy reading this. But again, I appreciated it for what it was, you know, and I liked learning about the system of magic in this book, but it's kind of just something that you have to stick with and get through, and that's why I would only recommend the first book. Now, I got the entire trilogy box set for Christmas this past year, so I mean, I might as well continue with it. I probably would have continued with it even if I didn't have the other two books over there, but I would recommend only the first book, and then after you read this, you can decide, you know, if you want to continue with it or not, because not everyone's going to like this. Not everyone is going to, you know, appreciate it, and I can understand why. I mean, this is not a perfect book by any means, but I think some of the things that some people, like the characters not being the most likable or being dark, I think some of that is intentional. But yeah, so I don't know. Overall, oh, and the ending. So one of the main characters, not Quentin, of course, but one of the more main characters sacrifices themselves, and I won't say who, just for spoilers' sake, but they sacrifice themselves and they die to save everyone else. And that's one of the things that happens. And then I'll just say the ending, there is a little bit of development for Quentin at the end, because he kind of realizes, all the things that he's taken for granted in his life and things that he didn't appreciate. So there is a little bit of development there with Quentin, at least. But it definitely sets itself up for a sequel in the end. So, I mean, for the most part, I thought the ending was good. I mean, I didn't mind it. It wasn't the greatest ending of all time, but it's not the end of the series, so it's not going to end all perfectly and whatnot. So, anyways, that's pretty much my review of The Magicians. It's different. Like I said, I appreciate it. It's definitely a very flawed book, but I feel like some of those flaws are intentional in a weird way. I appreciate what Lev Grossman did with this story and with these characters. I appreciate the fact that they're very flawed characters, even if they are unlikable at times. I think it makes them even more interesting. I appreciated the darker tone and some of the themes that were explored. The magic system, I think, is really interesting, so I'd probably give this like a 3 out of 5. Like I said, I hear the series does get better as it goes on, so I'll definitely be continuing to the next book, which is The Magician King. But yeah, and I'll probably do a review of that one too. I'll probably try to do a review of the entire trilogy on this channel. But anyways, that was the review of The Magicians by Lev Grossman. Let me know what you think if you've read this book. Will you read it? Let me know that too. And yeah, that's it for this one. I'll be back at you guys soon with more content. So peace, and keep on reading.